Her hair was coppery that night, and that night, her eyes were green. The Belonging Kind is the ultimate outsider story. It's the ultimate story of literal alienation in the modern world. It's the story of a linguistics professor, divorced and adrift. He spends most of his nights in bars. There's a sort of irony to his life. He teaches about communication, studies conversational openings. But as soon as he leaves academia, he finds himself awkward and out of place. When he tries to talk to people, he can't help but come across tongue-tied and maladroit. And he is, as he puts it, a sartorial stutterer, dressing in clothes that he doesn't realize are outlandish or incongruous until he sees the way that people look at him. But one night, he meets a young woman at a bar, and she is dressed to the nines. He finally gets up the courage to go up and talk to her, but it all comes out wrong. To his surprise, though, she responds. She is just as shy and awkward as he is, until their conversation is interrupted by another patron at the bar, and suddenly, her mannerisms transform. Suddenly, she speaks and acts as if she's from the Midwest, with a comfortable drawl and a like for country music. But when she goes back to talking with the professor, she is again hesitant and stumbling. No one else seems to notice this, but he does. When she leaves, he follows her, and then, on an empty street, he sees her change. All of a sudden, her dress changes colors. Her hair becomes short and silver blonde. He follows her from bar to bar, watching her shift and metamorphosize. Everywhere she goes, she fits in. Whatever is right for the place she's visiting, for the people she's near, that's what she becomes. The belonging kind. Each night, our protagonist tries to find her again. He searches. He's eating less. He's barely attending his work. He spends each night going from bar to bar to bar. He just knows he'll recognize her, even though she could look like anything. Until finally, he does. He sees her and a companion. He follows them back to their hotel, where he finds them roosting. Dozens of the belonging kind, wearing whatever they had last changed into. They are perched on every surface. He sees the nictitating lids over their eyes, and he runs screaming. Over time, the professor slowly becomes more and more disconnected from the world, drifting away from everything, leaving the college, working at night at a job he's not invested in, until he gets a call. All he hears is music. Music from the first bar where he ever saw her. He finds her, and he comes to realize he's one of them now. He moves with vapid, easy grace, changing his skin, creating money from a membrane in his coat. He has become the belonging kind. And perhaps the most telling sentence in the entire story is this. He ached with jealousy for the personification of conformity, this woman who was not a woman, this human wallpaper. There's a cleverness to Gibson's writing that might not clearly come through when read aloud. What the main character aches for, what he feels jealousy over, isn't the woman herself, though that's what it might seem like at first. What he aches for is the personification of conformity. He wants desperately to simply fit in, without having to work for it, without having to give up something or having to know that he's being false. He very literally chases it, and in the end, he literally gives up his humanity for it. This is what makes The Belonging Kind Gibson's greatest study of alienation. In his other works, he often explores outsider communities, or has characters that are alienated from society, but they're often not really alone, and they very rarely actually want to fit in. Here is where we see why. Where we see something of Gibson himself, I think. To him, you can't be human and also be one of the belonging kind. To fit in is to be unreal, to be part of something he fundamentally can't understand. It's to be part of something so alien and so other that he sees it not even as part of the human experience. And yet, fitting in is a huge aspect of modern society. It's the empty patter of small talk in a world so immense and populous that you could spend your entire life meeting people and not run into the same person twice. It's the effort to get dressed up and go out, just to receive validation from strangers. It's the expectation that something exceptional will happen, that this night will be different from all the other nights. There is an unmet desire in us for the world to be more magical than it is. So much of Gibson's later work depends on the idea that he is playing with here. Without spoiling too much of the man's bibliography, Gibson is a master at the seemingly chance encounter. Many of his books are a series of parallel, seemingly unconnected storylines that somehow magically wind up with all of these total strangers meeting up in the end in just the way they need to. Just like that perfect night on the town story. The way that everyone hopes every trip to the bar will go. Now, that might seem old hat today. Maybe you've seen stories like this before. But before Gibson, there really wasn't much of this in science fiction. It was something that he drew out by making his future histories more granular, by playing with the questions he faced living in a sprawling and disconnected world. But The Belonging Kind also brings up questions of the imitation of humanity. Much of Gibson's later work explores ideas about our ability to tell a simulacrum of mankind from mankind itself. If there was some great AI pretending to be a human agent, would we be able to tell? If such things did exist, how would we even know it? And you can see that theme taking shape here. In a world where we don't know many people that well, in a world of casual acquaintances and strangers who are a part of your life for the length of a business deal or a conversation at a bar, have we made ourselves more susceptible to imposters, to mimics who ape our humanity? Cyberpunk doesn't work in a small world. It doesn't work in a world of intimate connections where everybody knows everybody. It only works in the world of the belonging kind, the world of alienation and isolation that Gibson saw modernity as bringing. But through all that, he also brought a message of hope to sci-fi. Because while The Belonging Kind is a work of rejection, while The Belonging Kind is itself ultimately a rejection of the cost of fitting in, even while acknowledging how tempting it is to pay that cost, in Gibson's later work, those who are left behind by society always find a society of their own. They create a society just below the surface of this belonging kind world. And that, to me, is the future history he hoped for. For all the darkness of cyberpunk, that was the world he wanted to explore. I think that's enough William Gibson for now, but don't worry, we are absolutely coming back to him later. Until then, join us next time as we hop back in time and talk about the canals of Mars.